Yeah, so because we rely so much on imported soya, the weaker sterling has started to lead to an increase in feed prices. It will help exports, but as free-range egg producers, the export market isn't significant for us. So, if you like, there's a net deficit from the weakness of sterling in terms of how it affects our margin as free-range producers. So that's a concern. Obviously, as we carry on, that weak sterling might be just an economic shock from the news of Brexit, and then hopefully currency will stabilise a bit. And the other factor, looking longer term, is that if we are going to be out of the EU and out of the single market, there will be extra transaction costs from dealing with customs tariffs and border controls, which will lead to increases in prices for those imports as well, on top of any currency impacts. So the net impact it looks like it will be negative for feed in terms of reducing our margins with higher feed costs. Well, it's a hard one. There are two scenarios that will determine what the impacts will be, and so we can't say now exactly what's going to happen. The first scenario is that the UK negotiates to go into the single market as it currently stands, rather like the Norwegians and the Icelandics have done, and they have access to the single market, but they have to allow, under the EU agreements they have, free movement of labour and capital to have that. Now, with the DEFRA Secretary Leadsom and with the Secretary for State for exiting the EU, David Davis, they both said, given that choice, that they would rather not have a single market because they want to have control of the borders. So if there is that choice, then that has bigger implications than if we went into the EU single market rules as they currently stand. The other thing to consider is, and again what we don't know, is whether there'll be a informal negotiation for the new arrangements when we leave the EU after 2 years. So this Article 50 that's been discussed in the media quite a lot, which will trigger our exit from the EU, no one knows when that's going to happen. Latest forecast is early next year. Then we have to go forward for 2 years, so we'll be in the EU with the current EU rules for another 2 years at least. Then the question is what happens after that. Now, regardless of what we want, if there isn't a new arrangement fixed, we will be on to normal WTO rules, default rules, with a common tariff, which is set by the WTO, not the EU, the WTO tariffs, which will apply, and that will also have a different effect to if there was arrangements which were set up quite quickly with a twin track process. Our negotiations for exiting the EU happening at the same time as negotiations for setting up a new arrangement. Now the EU says you can't do that, you have to exit first, then start negotiations for the new deal, for the new arrangement. If that happens, it could be 5, 7, 8 years before we know what the new arrangement will be, and in the meantime we'll be on the WTO default position of tariffs. So the implications are really hard for me to tell you here and now, but for each scenario you can try and have if you like a general some general guidelines as to what might happen.